really pleased today to host this webinar as part of the Coram Innovation Incubator and in partnership with North Yorkshire Council. I've got to remember to call it that, given the changes they've had recently. But they're working on an interesting project as part of the incubator. And we want to share that with you all and hear from you really about some of your thoughts about what we're doing and hopefully get some ideas from you as well about how to improve what we're trying to do. We're calling this Reimagining Case Management Systems because actually we really want to think differently about how our case recording works for our children that we are looking after. And we're going to give you a starting point from where the North Yorkshire project is focusing on, but actually we want to broaden out the discussion today to really be quite broad about how we can improve things in general in terms of how we use technology. I think we've got a good number of people in, so we're going to get started. We are recording this webinar, so it will be hosted on our website. We can share the link out afterwards. So for those of you who can't quite stay for the whole thing, you'll be able to watch the rest of it. Or if you want to share it with those who haven't been able to attend today, you'll be able to do that as well. But hopefully you're all happy with it being recorded as well. If you want to turn your cameras off and things, then fine, that's absolutely fine. But while we are doing this, if you can turn your mute your microphones so we don't get too much background noise. Obviously, if you do have something to say, you can put your hands up, and then we can call on you and you can unmute them. But otherwise, I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to the Coram Innovation Incubator. So we're now in our third year. So I'm just going to mute that one as well. Of the incubator, and it's something that we at Coram have been sort of very keen to do for a while. We wanted to create a space where people could come together to generate and test and scale what we think could be really innovative ideas to tackle the problems, particularly the most sort of intransigent problems that face children's social care. We think we have to do this together rather than trying to do it in isolation, and we think that we need to do it with people from all sorts of different perspectives. So it's not just about the public sector trying to fix this. Coram here, the third sector and other organisations from the third sector, as well as the private sector, we think that we all have something that we can bring to the party in trying to tackle those problems. And we work with our members in the incubator to sort of define what our priorities are going to be for areas that we're going to focus on. So we're focusing on a minute in terms of making better use of data, workforce retention, SEND and early intervention, because we know we can't fix it all, and so we have to pick something. And through that work, then we offer a whole lot of stuff within the incubator. So webinars like today and learning sets where we're trying to share what is already going on and what is being learned from that work, so we don't have to make the same mistakes over and over again. We don't duplicate, and we can learn from each other. We have the collective, and there are 2 editions of that are available on our website that will show you, tell you about all the innovation that's going on around the sector that we're aware of. And if there are things that we've missed, please do tell us, and we can include it in the next edition that will go out probably in the autumn. And we think that's a really useful way for people just to see what else is going on in different aspects and share that information. We have an inset for our members, which is a short course based on design thinking, which is about helping our members create the culture and the capability to innovate, so that if they are trying to do things differently, then actually they've got a good chance of that being successful. We have a digital leadership course that we're looking to develop with our partners at Microsoft, and that's to support senior leaders and understanding about digital capability, and again, how you set up a culture and a work environment that can support that. And we provide networking opportunities. Again, we see the power in people coming together and working together rather than working in isolation. And so we try and provide those to our members as well. So that's just a very quick intro to the incubator. As I said, I'm very pleased today to be joined by colleagues from North Yorkshire. So we've got Johnny Hoyle and Claire Wilson, who are going to be talking through the bulk of this webinar today, telling you about a project that they have recently received funding from. As you can see by the bottom there, funded by UK government. Got to be very explicit about that. And I'm going to hand over now to Johnny, who's going to tell you a bit more about that.
Thanks, Kevin, and hi everyone. Welcome to this webinar. So this webinar is going to be the first of 4 webinars as we go along the journey of this project. Just before I start, just want to say thank you to the partners that you can see on the screen, everybody coming together to play a part in this journey to help us think about what are the future potentials. So I'm really pleased to see colleagues from the whole sector joining us here today. And what I'd like to do is to invite you all to take part. This webinar's not going to be about me just talking to you for the next hour and 20 minutes. We do want to hear your views. We do want to understand a little bit about where you are, what your thoughts are around what we're doing, other things that are going on in the sector that might help us, but also some of the things that you think are important for children's services, case management systems across the future 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Take us on, please, Dan. So we're going to start with a couple of polls, if that's okay. This is what we think the landscape of children's services providers looks like. These are the products that we think local authorities are using. But we just wondered if you would indulge us by answering a couple of poll questions, which should pop up on your screen now. The first one is asking about the sector that you work in. If you're from a local authority, if you're joining us from the private sector, if you're joining us from the voluntary sector, and then lastly, if you're joining us from anywhere else, please just pop in the chat where it is that you're joining us from. I've just seen Louise's answer. First one in the chat. Thanks, Louise. Okay. And our second question is going to be only for those colleagues that are joining from a local authority or from CAFCAS. Which is your case management system? And again, if you don't use one, please press that it's not applicable. If you use a different one to the one that's listed, or maybe a bespoke one, we've heard about a couple of bespoke ones, then please do pop it in the chat and let us know. Should the third in the list be OLM? Quite probably. Is OLM Care First and Eclipse?
It is, yeah. So I think, yeah. OLM.
Apologies. Yeah,
No,
OLM.
sorry.
And so we can see probably the results are reasonably close to the pie chart that's on the slide. Okay, Dan, will you take us on to our next slide? So I think certainly thinking about the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, there's been this conversation about the social work split. How long do social workers spend at their computers versus how long do they spend with children, young people and their families, looking at this from a children's services perspective? And I think one of the things that we've been thinking about is it's looking at that split in that way is not actually going far enough. What we need to know is, what are people doing in that 80% of time? What is it that that you can help save people time from? What is it that potentially people need to spend more time doing? And so we've been undertaking some work internally looking at breaking the 80-20 split down further. So we're thinking about if it's input, is that time spent typing case notes? Is that time spent writing assessments, creating relationship tables, for example, or keeping key demographics up to date? But potentially, is there an opportunity to save some time with the bullet points that you'll see on the right hand side? So social workers will often talk about having to click between different parts of their case management system to find the right pieces of information, whether they're form, a document, whether it's a case note, whether it's something that's written in an assessment, or whether there's a separate section to find information in supervision records, for example. Trying to look around the system, trying to include those clicks, trying to make sure that people are going to the right place and getting the right information quickly is going to be key. If we're one of the things we were talking about in North Yorkshire in terms of this project is very much that notion of cross-referencing. So the example that we talk about is if you're looking for a safety plan, and we use Liquid Logic, we use an LCS system, but if you're looking for a safety plan and you don't know this formally, then you might find it in the first place that you look. Let's say, for example, it's there in the Documents tab. But you've still got to then go and cross-reference to check in the case notes, in the supervision section, in the most recent assessments, in the forms section, to make sure that the document that you're actually looking at is the most recent safety plan, because it could be contained in any of those places. Similarly, that's not just about safety plans, that might be about a whole raft of situations for children, but social workers critically are losing time having to do that cross-referencing work because you don't know where that piece of information is that you need. And even if you find it, you've still got to double check and make sure there's not a more recent version in the other areas. Spending time getting to know children, young people and their families can be tricky. Social workers need to very quickly understand who's involved with a child, who are the people that might offer safety, who are the people that you might bring in to help build safety around children. But equally, who are the people that might pose a risk, and how do they interact with the children that you're worried about or that you're working with? And so doing that again is really tricky. Most case management systems will have a structured relationships type tab. You might go into a documents tab, for example, and find a hand-drawn eco map that will give you some guidance about those people. But one of the things that we know about children's journeys through care is that often if you're brought up in care, then we can lose people over time. We can lose connections with ex-foster carers. We can lose connections with the children that you used to play out with when you lived at home, or with the person that lived next door who would feed you sometimes, or who would look out for you. And some of that is about the system. Some of that is about being a new social worker, picking somebody up from scratch, and kind of how difficult is it to find those key pieces of information? How easy is it to lose track of who those important people might be? And I've heard some brilliant examples from our family group conferencing service about how using tools like mindful positioning, using tools like family group conferences can really help particularly our care leavers reconnect with key people from their past. To do that, you either need somebody that's prepared to go back through your case management system and find those people, or you need to rely on people telling you who they were. And then the last point in terms of information retrieval is how much social work time do we waste clicking through processes to get to where you need to get to? And so we've been talking to social workers about how do they trigger, for example, a children and families assessment? How do they trigger a care planning review? What are the things that they need to go through when children come into care in an emergency? How easy is that process? How straightforward is it? Or the reality being that many children's records have blank forms that people have had to trigger because the system makes you do a series of forms in a series of ways to get to the actual bit that you need to get to. And so we're trying to benchmark with our frontline social work teams that difference in terms of that 80%, what is it that people are actually spending their time doing? Is there an opportunity to save people time? So we've got another little poll just for our interest today. For our frontline practitioners for local authorities, our colleagues from CAFCAS, thinking about your computer system, to what degree does it help or hinder practice? So 1 would be it severely hinders practice. 5 would be it is absolutely central to all things beneficial in terms of social work in your organisation. If you don't work in a local authority, please don't press any of the buttons, and once the poll's closed, I'll talk you through kind of the rough score. So the average is about 3.5, somewhere in the middle, halfway between helps, halfway between hinders. Give people another couple of seconds to choose their options. It's going down now that I've said 3.5. We're at 3.3. And increasing slightly. So I think if it's all right, Dan, move us on to the next slide. So North Yorkshire has been really lucky in that we have been funded by the Department for Education to undertake a project looking at, can technology enhance social work? Can we create a product that means we can ultimately make better decisions quicker? Some of our benchmarking work has been literally sitting with social workers with a stopwatch and asking them to undertake certain pieces of social work. And I'm going to talk you through one of those examples in a little bit more detail after this. But the average time that it takes to find the first safety plan for a child on their record is 3 minutes and 27 seconds. And so remembering back to what I said earlier, even if you find it first time around, you still got to go and cross-reference it and make sure that that's the most recent safety plan. But the first one is 3 minutes and 27 seconds. We talked to our front door team about the time it takes them to screen referral information, and they think that from start to finish it takes them about 45 minutes. So not finding the info, but getting it, reading it, making a decision in relation to it. And at the moment, and probably since COVID, in North Yorkshire, we're receiving about 2,500 concerns about a child per month. So you can see that giving those people access to information quickly is going to be key. So Dan, will you move us on one? So talk to you a little bit about finding the most recent safety plan. What is it that you need to do in order to find that? And hopefully you can see this. If you can't see it and you've got a mouse, hold control and wheel your mouse forwards and it'll zoom in. If you're on a trackpad, pinch zoom from the middle going outwards and it will zoom the image for you. So on our system, once you've logged in, click on forms, have a look, click on case notes, have a look, type the word safety plan into the keyword search, click through each of the returned case notes. What will happen certainly on the Liquid Logic system is it will filter down to what it thinks might be something with the word safety and plan. So you might click through to see them. In terms of forms, you might search using the free text filter. You would need to make sure that you're checking completed forms rather than draft forms. You might check the family network details, check the assessment details, go into the Documents tab. You might manually search for the safety plan. You might, in terms of if you're using a liquid logic system, if something is stored in the Documents tab, you would manually download it to your device and then press open. You might also then check in the case notes section, the case note summary, at which point you should be satisfied that you've checked all of the spaces and you've found the document that you need. What we'd like to do is we'd like to develop a product that effectively stops this whole process after number 4. So if you're searching for a child safety plan, you would type the word safety plan and hit enter on your keyboard, and the technology will do the rest. The technology will identify the key pieces of information you need and give you the option to filter and search through, effectively cutting out the rest of that journey. Now, that's just one example. If you imagine all of the things that social workers search for and find and need to read across a week, and you can stop those processes, those 16-step processes at point 4, then you can start to see that you could be giving your social workers the tools to do the best job that they can do. So thinking about our case management system, we collect a whole bunch of really important information in an unstructured way. You would say social work is a narrative business. It is about the things that people tell you when you're on the phone to them, when you're sat on their sofa, in the aftermath of a difficult time, and the kind of golden pieces of information are often in those unstructured places. It's often in the write up about what happened, who was there, who helped, who might help, who can help bring about safety for children. And they're really difficult for us to extract in a meaningful way without social workers having to spend a significant amount of time going back through a young person's record, reading historical case notes, reading forms, assessments. The systems, and I think most of the breakout rooms actually covered this, local authorities use multiple systems for different purposes, and generally they don't talk or interact with each other. And what that means kind of in an ideal world is that people interact with each of them differently, but what tends to happen is people interact largely with their main system. So if you're a social worker, you will largely use LCS and not really navigate away from that or use the insights from the other areas. When key bits of information are in unstructured data rather than structured data, it can be really tricky to spot those patterns. So if you've got a young person talking to their social worker about a particular person or an address, and you've got another young person in a different part of the city talking to their social worker about a person or an address, it can be really difficult to correlate those two pieces of information because it's all in those unstructured pieces of data. What happens at the moment is you rely on systems and processes that involve humans joining the dots, having the conversations, taking the right information to the right meetings, and working with our partners to identify when those become really tricky. And so these are some of the difficulties that we're hoping our project will move towards resolving. So Dan, will you just take us on one more? What we'd like to do is we'd like to build a solution that gives you the ability to search everything all at the same time, whether it's on LCS, whether it's on EHM, whether if your local authority uses Mosaic or you use one of the other providers and you have multiple systems, but probably most importantly, that gives you the ability to search the different silos within your case management system. So can you, if you're trying to find a safety plan, like the clicks that we showed you before, instead of going through the 16 clicks to find and be assured you've got the right one, can you type the word safety plan, press enter, and can the technology find you the thing that you're after? Regardless of whether that is typed in a case note, regardless of whether that is handwritten on a piece of paper or whether somebody has written the safety plan during a supervision discussion, we want to build something that will just find all of those things and will return them in a scrollable results panel, a little bit like the one that you can see here. So it will think, the technology will think, these are the key pieces of information. I'm going to deliver them, and you scroll and have a look and think, yeah, that's definitely the right one. That's the one that I want to do. In that, can you build filters in? So if you know that you're definitely looking for a document, often our teams will spend a significant amount of time trying to find things like birth certificates, court orders. If you know that format, can we add some extra filters in just to try and get rid of that 3 minutes and 27 seconds? Could we replace that with somewhere around 10 seconds? And what would that mean across the whole workforce? Dan, take us forward one. On top of that, can we use technologies that are available now and have been available for a while to understand that unstructured data? Can technology identify key people that might help to build safety from all of those conversations? If a child's been open to a safeguarding team for a period of time, and you've got a good amount of information about that child and about the people around that child, can the technology give you the clues for those people so that you as a social worker can go, who are these and what do they mean to you? Giving social workers the breadcrumbs to go out and say, who have we got that might be able to build safety during this really difficult period of time? And if we can do that, if you were able to press on those people, could you then see why the computer thinks that they're a key person? Where have they been talked about? In what context? Has it been somebody that mum's taught? You know, let's say there was an incident on Friday night, and mum's talked about her neighbours who came round, got the kids, and the kids stayed at her house. If we get this right, in 3 years' time, there's another incident. Would we know enough to be able to say, actually, 3 years ago, those neighbours helped? They could be the key to helping us keep these children safe. And what you would rely on as things stand today is you would rely on a social worker going back 3 years worth of records to find that interaction. What this technology will do is give you the ability to kind of say, who are they? What's their interaction with this child? Can we use them to build safety? Take us forward, Dan. And if you can do that, if you can identify people that will help to keep children safe, could you use the same idea in another way? So if you've got children that are talking about a person, a place, a house, a shop, a takeaway that you think or that you know is risky, could the technology look at everybody's record and give you some proactive warning signs of, you need to be aware of these other 5 children who are also talking to their family support worker, early help worker, social worker about this person or this place or this address? If we make it, you're not relying on technology to make the decisions for you. And I think sometimes that can be the worry around technology. Is technology going to tell people what to do? Actually, those 3 areas of this technology will just give you the information so that you can make the best decision. So Dan, will you take us forward one more? So this is probably for the more tech-minded people on the call, and I'm not hugely tech-minded, but hopefully I'll talk it through. And John from North Yorkshire's on the call, so it might be John that we call on your expertise. But the solution looks a little bit like this. The records that we've got, the databases that we've got, are uploaded from our internal storage into the Azure Lake. Azure uses its AI machine learning capabilities to make sense of all of that unstructured data and then presents it directly to social workers, early help workers, family support workers in a way that's meaningful. So if you're a social worker in a looked after children's team and you need to know whether the child you're working with has had their immunizations, can you just type the word immunization in and press enter, and will it show you the results without having to search all the letters that have been uploaded, the immunizations tab, the case notes section? Can you literally just get the bit that you need directly from it? Equally, can it understand those links between people and places? Can it pull out all of that value so that you can help children either build networks that will keep them safe, identify risky people who might pose a risk to more than one child, but also thinking especially about children in care and care leavers, can this technology give you an opportunity to help young people reconnect to people that they've lost along the way, whether they're ex-foster carers, whether they're people that they went to primary school with, all that information that we've got, but it's so difficult to find at the moment that we don't do it. And so we're hoping that that's what we can do. What we'd like is to use some of this to cover one of the points actually that was made in one of the breakout rooms of, if a child turns up in North Yorkshire from another authority, how do you know without that speculative conversation, telephone calls, asking people? Does it open up an opportunity nationally for us to think about ways in which multiple authorities, all using different systems, rather than getting them to talk to each other, could they all talk to a central point like this to effectively share data? So that's where we think. Now, Chloe's survey has probably helped the topic of conversation for our next slide, which was thinking about your organizations, our last poll of the day. How digitally mature do you think your organization is? And we're thinking about your organization as a whole. So you'll see the box looks slightly different because if you're working in a local authority, you'll be on page 1, private sector page 2, voluntary sector page 3, and other organization page 4. So scroll through to the right section for your authority and click on the tab that you think you're at. Brilliant. Dan, will you take us on just in turn whenever we're having conversations about technology and doing things or thinking about things differently, then the conversation does need to be about money. If you're going to do something different, if you're going to think differently about technology, there will be a cost implication. But is there an opportunity to think about investing initially in order to save significantly afterwards? And so we've done some really rough calculations. These are not scientific. These are based on if we can reduce that information retrieval burden from 45 minutes to 10 minutes. So in effect, can you take those tasks and give people the information quicker so that they can make a decision? If you get 10,500 referrals that go to an early help or social care team in a 12-month period, and you can reduce that information retrieval burden, then effectively you would save 367,000 hours, 6,125 hours. Now, if you average that across the mid-scale for social workers, then you would effectively be able to save somewhere around £100,000 a year. So we're doing the benchmarking work in terms of this project, and probably in webinar 4 we'll cover how this product has saved time. But in terms of effort, putting the effort in, can you get the benefit out? We think that absolutely reducing that burden on social workers. You still want social workers to spend as much time recording as they do now, because you want children to have good quality records. But can you save time in them finding the right piece of information? Can you save time in making the right decisions, not having children come into care because you didn't have the right information on the Friday afternoon when somebody was worried, as an example? And so that brings us to the point of thinking about one of the other areas that we'd like in terms of the project is we're developing this product, but we would also like other people to be able to use it as an early adopter. And given that this is webinar 1 of 4, we were keen to get people's views of, if you or your organization was going to be an early adopter, what might the things be that you would need or want to see? So feel free to pop something in the chat or come off mute and talk it over. If you're a social worker, what do you think your leaders would need to see? If you work in a data team, what would be the things that the tech aspect would need to see to make some of this happen? Everyone's shy.
Johnny, I'll come in on our behalf.
Thanks, John.
And just let my camera fade in while I talk. As you know, Johnny and Claire, the things that we've experienced as we've started up this journey is the data security issues. So the data the way that the system works, what we're working with is we have to load data into the cloud, and productively Microsoft's machine learning models crawl over the data to pick out names, addresses, key phrases, and sentiment. But to do that, it does need to be in the cloud. Now, in terms of data security, we'll all have our own internal networks and everything, but putting the data in the cloud isn't just a simple matter of having an account with Microsoft and uploading it. There's security issues to do with moving large scale data that's very private to the internet. So those are some of the issues that we're working around. So now, if anybody was going to adopt a similar process to us, we'd be more than happy to share sort of the our findings and our solutions to the security when we get around them.
That's brilliant. Thanks, John. You're absolutely right. We have conversations about VPNs and IP addresses that go way over my head, but thankfully we have got John and colleagues at Microsoft that help us work some of those out. If anybody's got any thoughts or any bits that they want to pop in the chat, please feel free to. But Dan, if it's all right, will you just move us on to our last slide? I'm just conscious that we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to invite Kevin to join us to have a conversation about the care review recommended that the government looks at case management systems, that we're really ambitious about what they might be, what they might mean, and that I guess for anybody that has seen the news recently, there have been an influx of AI related conversations AI related news articles. Large language models are here, and people are using them, and they bring potential as well. So Kevin, I just wondered if you would talk to us about, if we were going to be really ambitious, what might a future case management system look like?
Oh, thanks, Johnny. So some of the stuff we already talked about and touched on in the group that I was in, room one, talking about, you know, how do you make it simple, make it as easy as possible for someone who's working with a child to do the tasks that they need to do. But actually, the thing I want to bring us back to is, what is the purpose of the case management system? Who is it for? And we've talked about this in the past, Johnny, about, you know, is it for the person that's in care, and to what end? Is it for the social worker who's working with that child? Is it for the organisation to understand what's going on with all the children that they're dealing with? Or actually, do you go even bigger than that? Is it for the nation to understand what's going on broadly? And I think it's, you know, it's for all those different purposes, and we have to find a system that can meet all those different needs. And where's the intersection in those, but also where are the tensions? So, Louise, you put a question in the comments earlier about, you know, the tension between having something that can be quite customizable and can suit the needs locally. But then how do you have it so that systems can talk to each other from different organizations, and provide meaningful information and insight, so that when you pull it together, you can still get something meaningful out of it? So we're going to have to trade off all these different things, but hopefully not trade off, but bring all these things together and play them off each other and see where we can resolve some of those tensions, but hopefully come up with something that is really better for everyone when they're doing it. So if you're at the national level, you want to understand, you know, the broader trends about what's going on, and want to understand what works and what doesn't from a research point of view, then there must be a better way of being able to look at that data in a safe, anonymous way that gives us the insights into the interventions that are taking place, the circumstances in which those interventions are happening, and the outcomes. For example, from a social worker and the manager's point of view, you talked about the fact that, you know, social workers, if they can understand about the performance, if they can understand about, you know, what are the different things that they need to be doing for the children that they are responsible for, and help them prioritize, help them have the information at their fingertips that they need to make those decisions. You know, there's a vast amount of information that's collected, and so how do you have a system that can pull out the salient points so you don't miss something important? And then for the child or young person, actually, you know, as corporate parents of these children, they will come to us when they leave care and want to look at the record. And a lot of the disappointment is from the fact that they are probably looking for that record to tell them about their childhood, because no one else is there to do that. But case records are primarily written from the point of view of the professional, and the decisions and the actions that are taking. And so there's a whole gap in there. And so what, you know, but there are ways that we can make these systems work for those children to help them understand actually the you know, the good and the bad that went through their life, the small things, the little things that are important to them that might not necessarily get captured in minutes of meetings, and things like that. So, you know, you talk about voice here actually is one of the things, and audio recording and so on. I know you've been trying to do that in North York, and I know some other local authorities are doing that, where at the minute it's audio transcription. So social workers are talking out their case notes, for example. So it means that that's a lot quicker. They can potentially do it in the car immediately after a visit, which means it's really fresh in their mind, not a few weeks later when they're trying to go through their notes and remember what was discussed and trying to recall all that sort of stuff. But actually, if that audio could be saved as well, then I think for a young person, be able to hear someone say it would be a lot more powerful, a lot more meaningful to them than trying to read it in black and white text. So there are things like that. You know, we talked about audio, video as well potentially, but there are, you know, some concerns around that. But there are things like that that I think could be really important for young people, and really change the nature of those case records so that they can help them really understand what's going on. So that was just some starters for 10 there from my side.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. And I think probably the conversation's helpful when you say, who is this record for? I guess depending on who you ask will depend on what answer you get. You know, often young people very much feel it's their record. But then I guess one of the breakout rooms talked about the conflict between practice and the legal arena, and things being prepared for court. And I guess there's a variety of different conversations around.
Oh, have we lost Johnny?
I can't hear him, Kevin.
No, I think we haven't we? All right.
Oh,
Oh no, there
is
we
he
are. Johnny,
back?
you're back.
I'm here. Can
Sorry,
you
Johnny.
hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah, you just talked about lawyers and being a court documents and things like that. Obviously, have a very particular purpose that needs to be on the record and so on. But then you cut out. Oh no, he's frozen again. But he's got a nice smile on. Right, I'm gonna have to fill now, aren't I? So, yes, I think what Johnny's trying to say is, there are absolutely things that need to be recorded. Oh no, you are okay, but you can't. Try again, Johnny.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yes, sorry, I don't know what's happening. There is just that conflict between who does it belong to. I've seen some really good examples of local authorities that write everything directly to children. I've seen some examples where parts of a local authority write directly to children. What's your thoughts, Kevin, about if you look at the bottom 2 points on the left hand side, the ways that tech can make some of that stuff easier too, around syncing messages, automatic uploads, all that type of stuff, taking the admin out of social work?
Oh, absolutely. So we know that some systems will do that already. For example, with emails, you can integrate with Outlook, and then there's a button and it uploads it straight away, so you don't have to copy and paste it. It might save seconds just for that task, but if you think about how many times a social worker is doing that and multiply that up as you did before over a year, it can save a considerable amount of time. You want some safeguards in there. You want everything uploaded, and you want to make sure that the information that you're uploading is relevant and appropriate. But where it's needed and where it's necessary, absolutely technology could do those sorts of things for us, I think, rather than having to do the manual processes that we follow at the moment.
Brilliant. And then I guess on the right hand side, things like voice controls are interesting. We're all used to using the Siris or the Alexas. Is there a world in which you can voice control? You can say, I want to write a children and families assessment about this young person. Technology wise, I don't see any reason why not. You would just need to have a system or a process that understands what that means. And I guess lastly, we talk a lot in social work about supervision. We talk a lot about the importance of having conversations, and then we spend a lot of time during supervision recording everything down onto children's records or onto the forms, but lose some of the art of just having a conversation. And I wondered, Kevin, whether there's any mileage in potentially using technology to help understand the conversation, transcribe the conversation maybe, and freeing up practitioners and their supervisors to engage in just a really good conversation where they reflect and where they think and where they make decisions together, and the technology does the rest.
I think definitely, even with this Teams meeting, we could be just transcribing it. The system knows who's logged in by by the information, so it can attribute the comments that you make to it. But I think I'd want to go a step further about, you talk about task generation there, for example. If it can analyze what's been discussed and someone says, right, there's an action point here, for example, can it pull that out, record that in a distinct way that means it then appears somewhere in a dashboard or whatever for that social worker and for the manager to keep track of? And make it really easy for someone to just keep a track of all those different things that you've agreed and potentially decided to do. So if you can automate a lot of that stuff, and as you say, we're trying to free up and make it as simple as possible for social workers and their managers to do the job they're trained to do. That is the most important bit about keeping children safe.
Brilliant, thank you. So that brings us probably to the end of our time together today. I just wondered if anybody's got any tips, tricks, any pieces of brilliant practice that they want to share, any pieces of innovation in their organizations that they want to talk about. Feel free to pop it in the chat or come off mute and we can talk.
So I will share one as a starter. So we talked about voice notes and transcription. If you've got Office 365 and you're able to install that on your smartphone at work, you can open up the Office app, You can start a Word document and you can press dictate. And you can just then dictate everything out and it will transcribe everything that you say. So I mentioned it a bit earlier, if you're a social worker, you've just left a visit, you've got it in the car, and that's dead time. It's not time you could normally work, but you start that transcription up and you can just talk and you can say, you can address it to the child, the young person as well. And then, by doing that, then automatically that case note is going to be a lot more sort of descriptive, and probably a lot more powerful and meaningful for that young person. And when you get back to your office, then you might need to tidy it up a bit. It'll be saved somewhere in your OneDrive. You might need to tidy it up for grammar and just making sure that it's actually spelt things correctly and recognize the words that you've said. But then all you have to do is copy and paste that into your case system, and that's it. Rather than, as I said, 3 weeks later, going through your notes and trying to remember what was done, what was said. And hopefully that would save a lot more time, but also result in better quality case notes for that particular event.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. And we do something similar in North Yorkshire. We use Teams to send voice notes straight to our business support. At the moment, that's a manual process, but we definitely find that, one, the record is updated quicker because people do it there and then, and two, that it often contains better quality memories. I think Kevin mentioned about young people accessing their records in order to get those memories, and we've found that when social workers send them straight after seeing somebody, you capture much more of those memories around what have you done at school, you got a sticker today, what was the sticker for, that kind of richness of conversations in it. And Louise makes the point in the chat that some of the case management products already do have voice to type technology. I don't know, Louise, do you know if they're mobile friendly? Can people do those on the move, or is that going back to the office and doing it?
I think they do have that. But I suppose one of the things that so another project that I've been working on with Chloe, if she's still on the call, was talking about what local experiences of what case management systems can do, and to what extent that is because the product, the market supplier doesn't offer that at all, and to what extent it's been a local barriers or whatever to using it. For example, video. Sometimes the cost of data storage has been an issue, and so sometimes video can't be used, not because the vendors, the market suppliers don't provide that, it's because there's not the capacity in the local authority to actually implement it. So in thinking about how we can improve case management systems, I think there's no doubt a lot that can be done, but it's also worth going back and seeing what the market could potentially already deliver and what the barriers are to making the most of what's already there. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks, Louise. Kevin, did you want to?
Well, I was going to say, one of the things we're very keen to be able to hear about and then we can share on are the tips and tricks, what people are doing right now, how they're using technology in small ways as well as big ways. So we talked about the future of case management, and that's quite a big thing, but actually the little things, how are you using technology right now, whether it's WhatsApp or the transcription and so on. If you tell us about them, we can write them up in a way that hopefully people could replicate, and we can share it out then to the whole sector, so that little by little, all social workers hopefully can pick up these tips and tricks and just free up a bit of time. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. There's love going for Mariana's comment about regional accents. You'll notice from my accent, I also have suffered with the technology doesn't recognise the Yorkshire twang. But yeah, absolutely right. Helpful. The tools are certainly so much better than they used to be. But there can be that bit about going in and tidying up, which may be frustrating. But then I guess I would also say what we found is containing those memories, that bit of more rich information. Actually, if you're tidying, you're still capturing stuff that you might not if it's in a notebook and waiting for a while. So that brings us to the end of our first webinar. There's going to be 4. We'd love it if you'd join us for the other 3 to track this project, to see where we get to, and hopefully to hear about other people coming along and joining our journey with us. Before we go, just want to express our thanks to Coram for hosting us, to Kevin and the team, and to colleagues from the Department for Education, colleagues from Microsoft who support this. This project wouldn't happen without all of you working together to help us do it. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.